This play opened up a lot of issues around mental health, especially for young adults and adolescents. And in my 20 whatever years of education now, one thing that I've learned is that it's very difficult to open up those kinds of conversations. So I was wondering, from your perspectives and what you do kind of day in, day out, and the families and adolescents that you work with or young adults, why? Why is it so hard? Why is it so hard for people like us to have these kinds of conversations broadly in our fields, in education, or in the work we do with parents and with kids? And Eli, from your perspective, is it difficult to have those kind of conversations with adults in your life, with people at your schools, or the folks that you've worked with, your friends, your family? What was it like for you? Why don't you start?
Oh, wonderful.
Right before this, I promised him I wouldn't start with him, so I figured it was a good idea.
You did do that. So is that a hard conversation? In all honesty, not for me, because back when I was using a copious amount of drugs, there was no self-esteem left. So everything about me was a lie. I like the Mass song. That was a nice one. I very much related to that. And so I think now I've kind of gone 180, and I kind of do the reverse, which is I literally just wear everything about me on my sleeve. I guess not figuratively. And so with that stuff, I don't know, it comes out easy for me, but I also understand that it doesn't for a lot of people. And, I'm thankful that, 3 years and a bit sober now, that I'm happy enough with who I am that, if I'm meeting somebody for the first time, and it's like, I'm a recovering drug addict, depression, suicidal stuff, and they're like, I'm back in the hell up, trying to, je parle français un petit peu, so in the spirit of the show, I'll try to watch my French. Thanks, I thought that was funny. Anyways, I'm comfortable enough with who I am that if somebody was like, I'm backing out, I'm like, all right, suit yourself. But I'll, go find people that don't sort of scare away from that. But the thing is that there's a lot of people who scare away from that. And I guess these guys will probably have more insight than I would on this, but I don't know. I think there's a lot to be said about not offering your own comments, your own, not delving too into it. If somebody shares something with you like that, just listen, because there's a lot of people in this world that want to give you their advice. There's a lot of people that just do it, and there's a lot of people that are paid to do it. But like I said, I think there's a real benefit to just sitting down and listening.
So I kind of forgot what the question was, but I first wanted to thank you very much. I think it was one of the most moving plays, and how it sort of moved from laughing at times to crying in the audience. I just want to thank you for that. It made me think about, maybe getting back to your question, Bob, about how maybe even using arts as a way to educate, because I feel that one of the things that is still in society today, and I use society in general term, is probably a sense of some bias and prejudice against mental illness, and how to educate the families that suffer with it, but also the greater public, and where I see a lot of kids from in schools. And usually a lot of times these difficulties are playing out in schools as well as families. And people don't start becoming people at the age of 18. So, we understand mental illness can start very young. And as a psychiatrist, sometimes by the time people get to me, they may have been sick for years, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And they come in and they kind of want to have been better yesterday. So, I guess it's the education, and it would be like the early identification to give us an opportunity and an obligation to get these people sort of back on track. So I just feel like educating. 10 years ago, I remember trying to knock on schools' doors just to go in to give a talk about something like ADD or depression, and just really being turned away or just wanting to avoid the topic altogether. And it's been nice to see the change now, where you go out and you see big crowds coming, asking questions, wanting to be educated, and knowledgeable. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you. One of the things that struck me is you're saying people need to just learn to listen. And this actually is when families come in and they're in such distress, what happens for the most part is I just try to get everybody to just sit, and I'm sure at the Ackerman Institute you guys do this. I mean, I think I've learned from Jonathan Lampert and Jillian Walker and stuff, just to sit and help families to sit back and even listen to the silence that they're going to get from their teenagers for a bit, and take their time and have some patience. If people could take a look, if you haven't read Andrew Solomon's Far from the Tree, I think one of the things that resonated with the play as I was watching today is the way that several of the kids didn't fit the mold of what their parents expected or wanted of them, and then also the kids themselves within having some sort of expectation of what they are supposed to be, to peers, to the parents, to educators, and so forth. This causes, when there's such a disparity between the parents' expectations but also the kids' expectations, it causes shame, humiliation, embarrassment, and feelings of hopelessness. I think there's a big rush for everyone to try and fix things, which, you know, as we also saw in the play, winds up blowing up in a lot of ways. But I do think that helping people to sit back and just listen to start is a place, I think, where we start to get at least a bit of an understanding of one another. Read that book, Far from the Tree.
So thank you so much. This was a really powerful play. The question about why we are not having these conversations, I mean, I think it's fear. I think that it's really scary to look at something in the face and kind of see that mirror of ourselves and oftentimes our deepest, darkest fears. And I really commend the work that we saw tonight for naming some of that, right? Like really calling it out. And in terms of listening, you know, what I see so much in my work is this cyclic, right? Like, so one thing turns into another, and our behavior sometimes gets worse and worse and worse because we're trying to do the best thing, but we're actually hurting others, right? And so I think breaking that cycle is so hard and so scary because we're entering new territory. And I was thinking, what did they call it? Gooned, to when they got gooned, right? Like this really abrasive, you know, coming in the middle of the night and getting gooned. Well, it's horrifying, but it's also so clearly a break in the norm, and sometimes we need that. So,
yeah, thank you all. I'm reminded of a phrase used in psychology by some folks who call it the loss of the perfect child. And it's a phenomenon that we all go through in that moment that we realize something's wrong, because something's wrong with all of us. And I think coming to grips with that transition whenever and how it happens is what we're up against and what makes it so hard to talk about. I know that I've always struggled as a leader of schools with kids with learning problems because to talk about it, because it's this unique intersection where, you know, a lot of the parents of kids in my school, they don't want their child to have a learning problem. They want them to sort of be in regular education, and that's one transition. And then you have families of kids who struggle with emotional issues who are begging to come to my school because they'd rather have ADHD than some other diagnosis. And the answer to all of that mess comes from a friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Jonathan Cohen, who I've worked with for a long time on this stuff, who says simply, we all need to understand that growing up is messy and that we all are imperfect. And that if we understand that, then we can start to have conversations about all the ways that we're all a mess and be honest about it and go past the labels and diagnoses and get to real solutions, which starts with listening and can go to powerful programs like this that we do at my school annually on tall ships and into the wilderness and Sometimes I think the solution is we're stuck in all sorts of educational paradigms that are 100 years old, and that everybody should be going into the woods, not waiting for them to have some difficulty that leads them there. So I think that's what's at work, and I just close by saying that I've been right up against this recently, because we are infusing this, what we're calling wellness curriculum, which is another code word. We used to call it social emotional education, another code word. It's really about mental health, and we're calling it mental health this time, and talking about mental health and trying to raise awareness for all students about what are some of these issues are. And we sent a letter home about that, and we're getting ready to run the classes and the curriculum run by the National School Climate Center. And I saw a parent of a very anxious ADHD dyslexic student at a fundraiser the other night. She said, "Scott, I have to tell you, I got the letter from the head of the New York campus about these mental health issues. Are you guys accepting kids with mental health problems, and you didn't tell us?" And I said, "Well, lots of kids with learning problems have anxiety and depression." And she said, I like mine, I know, but I just don't want to talk. I just don't want to call it that. All right, so I think that on the being right up against that and sitting here tonight, all I could think of was back to what I think a couple of us said about the power of the arts starting a conversation, because I sat there and thought to myself, I wish everybody I knew could see this, because it just... them. Yeah, I will. I already have on Facebook today, and I'm going to shout louder tomorrow, because I do think that a powerful performance like this breaks down the walls between the labels and just the otherwise messiness of being a parent and being an educator. Beyond that, I've been a parent for 20 years. My daughter turns 20 tomorrow. I've been an educator for 26 years. That's 46 years of fully not knowing the answers, but I guarantee you I'm better as an educator and as a parent than I was 2 hours ago. So I spread the word about this. Yeah.
Thanks. So before I was the head of school at Stevenson, which is a therapeutic day school here in Manhattan. In fact, it's the only therapeutic day school here in Manhattan. I was at a school for kids with learning disabilities. And one of my jobs as kind of moderator of the panel tonight was to think of another head of school to get to come here. And it was an eye-opening experience for me, because I went down the list and I was thinking, nope, they'd never do it. Nope, they'd never do it. Because there is still that stigma attached to mental health. And it's so kind of freeing for me to be at a school, to be at Stevenson, where the kids' challenges are embraced. And like, we get it. We know it's not going to be smooth. We know that they're going to need support. We know that some of them are going to start with us and not be there at the end of the year, or go and come back. It's that kind of continuum of care, and schools don't often think of themselves as part of that continuum of care. But one thing I have learned, certainly since joining Stevenson, is that we certainly are. And hopefully, like Roy is now welcome to go to schools sometimes and talk about these things. Hopefully the next time something like this happens, it'll be easier for me to think of someone to invite. But I knew I could count on Scott, because he and I go way back, and I know that he's struggling with these issues at his school the same way we're struggling with them at mine. So it's a good thing. Let's see if there are questions out there. Not that I can see out there, because there's this giant sun right in our eyes. Oh, you're good, because I can see you right there. There you go.
Eli, I have a question for you. So, do you think that you would have benefited during your struggles from a program like Wilderness after seeing the show, or even beforehand? Do you think that this is something that would help quicken the process of sobering up, or does it make you want to go back and experience something like this, or, yeah?
It's a fascinating question. I myself did not attend Wilderness. I attended both an outpatient and inpatient rehab sort of. Wilderness, I've always seen it as like, if you screw up at the inpatient rehab, it's like the next level. And thankfully, I was good enough at manipulating and not being truthful that I didn't end up getting sent there. The reason I don't want to make a blanket statement is simply because I believe that this show tries to show the best of these kind of wilderness therapies. And unfortunately, there are some horror stories, quite a few of them have happened to close friends of mine. That being said, if you're talking about a well-run program that works, that is not, anyways, the politics of it are sort of not relevant. If you're talking about a good, solid program, it can help. The help comes from the fact that it really is depriving you of everything that you once knew. It's rewiring your priorities, and it's forcing you to think internally in a way that you hadn't before. That doing that while also distracting you enough that you can sort of make it through that very difficult period. So there are some benefits, but can I say it would have blanketly helped me? I'm not sure. I respected this show greatly in sort of the reality of it, of that not everyone turned out all right. And I'll tell you, I went to, between my inpatient and my outpatient rehab, I went to rehab with dozens of teens and adolescents. Off the top of my head, I know 3 are dead and 1 is sober, and that would be me. And that's, I don't know if I want to call it the luck of the draw or if it's simply thanks to all the wonderful people I've had in my life who have supported me. But, it's unfortunate that there is only so much these things can do, and that's why this kind of conversation is so important, because yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the important lines in the play is when Mara turns to Cole and she said, look, it's your journey. Ultimately you really have to decide if you want to get better or not. And when people say things to me like, did it cure your son? I say that there is no such thing. There's not like a silver bullet that comes along one day and poof, everything is okay. That mental health for all of us is a continuum. And I feel lucky that as a mom, my son decided to get better. That's the way I put it. Because one of the things going through this personally that I really learned was at a certain point, you just don't have any control. You can just be the best parent you can be, and it's up to your child to determine their own path.
Can I speak for both of us? No. We work together a lot. And I was thinking about the journey exactly when you were both talking and how it was presented in the play. This is something that comes to us a lot, and I'm sure you see this too, as parents will come in and they'll say, can you cure my kid? Can I get my kid back? That sweet little baby or that 7-year-old, where that's when the switch was thrown and all of a sudden, Damien appeared in my house or whatever. And the thing of it is, there's so many factors that some we heard about, a father who was, off kilter, or some we heard about and you can identify, and some we'll never know that are biological, genetic, hidden. We can't be with our kids 24/7 to know what influences are out there. So there's plenty that happens in the process of mental illness being realized. And one of the things also to bear in mind is whatever mental health issue you're looking at or thinking about, it is an exaggeration of what is found on the normal spectrum, all right? We all have anxiety. We all have mood issues. We all have times of anger. These are there. There's all times we're hyper and so on and so forth. So this is where, these processes go out of control. There isn't a cure. There really isn't a cure. There is a helping an individual develop enough insights into themselves, recognizing their limits, their strengths, their Achilles heels, recognizing that their parents are human, and that the people around them also, everybody's flying with baggage. It's how much of it we have and can stuff in the overhead or underneath and what is coming out. And then being able to make sense of that and making better choices for themselves to bring those mental health issues under control, under their control. And there'll always be bumps in the road because it's a journey that takes many twists and turns.
this isn't really about mental health, but I just have a question about like the play. Like the actors used, did they actually go to Wilderness, and were those like their real parents on the screens?
So the parents on the screens were people that I interviewed over the course of the past 2 years, and they are real people, and their kids are being played by actors. So the actors themselves did not go to Wilderness, but they are playing real people. And they're actually all coming for our opening night where we're honoring Andrew Solomon, and then they're coming on, all the actual families are coming to see the show on Wednesday, and on Thursday the families are also going to be on a panel, so I'm very nervous and excited for them to see the work. But yes, it was the parents are real people. Other question?
So I just want to thank you for this, because I too have gone through depression, and just my main question, I guess, is how do you respond to the people who kind of make you feel like you did something wrong when you say you're depressed?
All right, we got a lot of experienced therapists here. Who wants to?
That's a big one. So, oh, great, Roy gave it to me. Yeah. So, one of the things I think is, at least the three of us here, I think, are the mental health providers, and we probably represent different approaches. So I'm going to guess you're more psychodynamic? Art therapy, definitely psychodynamic then. I'm more cognitive behavioral, and Roy is more psychopharmacological and supportive therapy, right? So what we would want to do is think about with you what happens when you're with someone, whether it's someone who's related to you, a friend, or whatever, and you are experiencing the interaction as they're looking down on you in some way, or blaming you in some way, or like, come on already, just get yourself out of this, look, your life is great, what's the matter? What is going on with you internally that owns whatever the interaction in the moment is? How can we help you in our different ways of stepping back from that, being mindful in this situation, and looking at this other person and recognizing they have their limits to understanding and appreciating another person's perspective, and that your feelings and what you manifest and who you are is valid and deserves respect and the listening ear, and just the ability to be you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, feelings are real. We have this, we think, oh, this is just a feeling, it's not real. Feelings aren't facts. Well, right, that's true, but feelings are very real in our bodies. Our brain changes when we're having feelings. Our body changes when we're having feelings. And I agree. I mean, I think that we need to come to a place where we can not invalidate ourselves despite the inevitable, right, at times, invalidation that we're receiving from the world. And that's really hard to do, to detach those two experiences. But, like, we need to know our truths, and also not degrade that our struggle's real, right? Feelings are very real, whether that's depression or anxiety or anything else. So, yeah, I mean, I work with trans kids and trans families, and there's a lot that people just don't understand, right? So I'm always talking to people who are like, well, I don't get it, or this is a girl, this is a boy, I don't believe that you're really who you say you are. Well, at the end of the day, I mean, these families have to go home with their children, with themselves, and come to a place where they can put their head on their pillow at night and all the haters, they need to go. They need to go elsewhere. So.
It should be noted that Andrew Solomon had a severe depression at 14. And part of it was the feeling different. And coming to terms with it, you can see how he got out of it, but he has written extensively about it.
Where am I going?
Hi, thank you. I've seen a few of your plays actually, and they're always really moving, but this one, I wasn't expecting to feel such a personal connection to it, partly because I didn't even, anyway, I don't know. But my question, each of the parents in this story sort of came to a point of, okay, I have to do something about this. And so Annie, in your interviews or any of y'all with backgrounds in health professions, have you been able to identify in your conversations with parents when or guardians when that decision came to speak to somebody? Like, how did they themselves come to terms with it?
I asked each parent or a group of parents that I spoke with about what was that moment where they decided to send their kid to wilderness. What was the defining moment? It really is. I think one of the things that's really become very clear to me through this whole journey is that people normalize dysfunction, and I think what can happen is you can live with in a very dysfunctional situation for a very long time until there is a day where it gets so bad that you can't stick your head in the sand anymore. And like it's different for different people, but like with Cole, for instance, it was when he climbed the crane, climbed a 250-foot crane, and his parents really said it's a true story, and his parents literally said, oh my God, if we don't do something now, our son may end up dead. And as you said, a lot of times children who go to wilderness have been in and out of rehab. They've had tutors, they've had therapists, they've had all kinds of different situations where of all the people I talked to, and I talked to probably about 36 people all in, I didn't really talk to anybody who said, oh yeah, he was just cussing me out, I just thought I'd do this. It really became kind of in many ways like a last resort for parents. So, yeah, I mean, things generally get pretty extreme before you're willing to put your kid on a plane and send him out to the high desert for many weeks at a time. So, but I would like to thank you all so much for coming. So tell everybody we're here till the 13th of November, and thank you so much for coming, and thank you.